Hello, everyone. I am Peter Onen. I'm a spiritual teacher. And if you'd like to learn more about me, you can find me on my website, peteronen.com. With that, we've got Robert Michael here today, and we're going to talk about the birth certificate topic, or certificate of live birth. Robert Michael is a private counsel, authorized representative, and educator. I guess let's start with that. How would you describe yourself, Robert?
Well, basically, I am an authorized representative for hundreds of people on accounts that they dispute with their credit cards because they're unsecured debts. And under the law, you have a right to dispute those debts or the validity of the debts. So most people don't understand the language of the law, or how it's put together and what those rights are. So they come to me and I act as their lawful authorized representative. So I speak for them. So that's what I do with the authorized representative. Private counsel is anyone can be private counsel. So people come to me, they have issues, they want to talk about it, they counsel with me, I discuss it with them, I give them my opinions, never any legal advice, just opinions. They form their own decisions and they move from there. So I'm also counsel in that respect. I educate people on trusts and I counsel them with trusts as well. So private business trusts specifically at this point in time to protect their assets and everything else that they have that's tangible, right? So all the things they have in life are protected through the trust. So I educate them on that as well.
All right, perfect. And where can people find you, Rob?
They can find me on my website at www.truth, the letter N as in Nick, truthntrust.org.
All right, perfect. So let's just jump in. Birth certificate, certificate of live birth. Let's start with the first question that comes up for me is, is there a difference between the birth certificate and a certificate of live birth?
Yeah, there is. So first off, we have to understand what a certificate is. A certificate is merely the proof or evidence that an original exists, right? And usually you get a certificate when you're talking about title, right? And then that begs the question is, what is title, right? Title is nothing more than a receipt. It's just sometimes it's a long receipt, you know? So you have this certificate, you have two different kinds. Usually in the United States of America, you have the certificate of live birth, which comes first, and then you have the birth certificate. Now, some people, it's called different things. Some people can't get a hold of their certificate of live birth for various reasons. That's the state's business. But the difference is the certificate of live birth is evidencing that this being was created, right? And that this being said, hey, I'm going to register with the state. I'm going to register my biological property with the state. Okay, so they register that biological property. Then there's a birth certificate that then gets issued, which certifies that once this entity registered itself with the state, it in fact became a legal separate entity, just like a business called a registered organization. It's just like any other company out there, but it has your name on it. So the birth certificate evidences what the certificate of live birth created.
All right. All right, hold on. Let's take a step back. Everyone's head is blowing up. Okay. So if you're new to this, your head just exploded and you're like, what the hell are you talking about? Okay. So let's take a step back here. And what is the big thing with the CoLB, or certificate of live birth? What is this big craze that's going on? Can you talk about that in a big picture perspective?
Well, yeah, it all boils down to financial stuff, right? So the country back in 1930 needed a way to securitize its debts to the bankers. So the way that it did that, because it didn't have any more gold, because the bankers had already robbed the country of that, they had to use the people as collateral. They had to use our life energy and our what we can create, so to speak, as collateral. Okay, so in order to do that, they had to create an artificial entity for us to function through. So they take whatever's ours and they actually hold it in what's called abeyance, right? They take our value and they hold it in abeyance while we're functioning as this entity. right? And this entity, it all gets created through the certificate of live birth. But again, the bottom line is why it was done was all strictly for financial, economic reasons to fund and to continue to fund or have funded the bankrupt entity known as the United States. So it had to be done.
All right. So would you say that the birth certificate, or rather it's more specifically the CoLB topic, would you say that this came about as a way to play the particular game that the elite have been playing for, you know, a very, very long time? Would you say that that's how it kind of came about?
Well, yeah, absolutely. It had to be done in order. Well, actually, it could also be a protection, believe it or not. Many of the people awakening to this whole birth certificate thing, they think it's the devil, you know, it's Satan. But it actually could be, if you look at it one way, it could also be a protection. So yeah, this was all done to play this entire game of commercial, you know, commerce, world, global elitism, you know, capitalism, corporate ladder type of structure. And it was all put together to fit that structure. And you have a way to become, to ascend that structure. It's just not easily laid out for anyone, you know, because, well, then everyone would be doing it. But it takes a responsible person to follow those footsteps and get out. So if you look at the grand scheme of things, and common sense tells you, well, why don't I know this? Why am I not taught this? Why am I not taught finance and law? Because we're not responsible enough. They've dumbed us down so we act like children, so that we can't be responsible enough to do that. So those that are taking responsibility can actually do this. You know, that's what I did. It's what others have done. So it is part of a big, much, much bigger picture, much bigger picture.
Can you talk about the protection aspect? You mentioned that you can actually use it for a protective measure. Like, what do you mean by that? What can you protect yourself with?
Well, it's not really us that uses it for protection. It's the government that has a protection mechanism, because what they do is their claim, you know, to this, or could be their claim to this, is that everything you own is alien property to them, right? So because you're an alien to the United States, you're not, that's a whole other ball of wax. However, you're considered an alien in your living capacity. So they take that property that is attached to this non-living you that the birth certificate is evidence of. They take that property and they hold it in abeyance, meaning they're holding all that for you until you show up to claim it. Just so happens that 99% of Americans, or 99.9, never show up. They die. And then they go, oh, well, they didn't show up. We got all this property here that we're going to have to make sure they pay their taxes and probate and all that stuff, you know, we're going to hit them again, you know. But that property is there and it's protected and it's yours, you know. So once you're able to ascend the relationship that's currently set up between you and this entity that the birth certificate evidences, now you have a right to that property and they don't. So it's actually protected. The property being whatever this name and social security number, which is an account and is another piece of property, is attached to. So that property is held for you until you're old enough, mature enough to claim it.
All right. All right. I'm going to do it one more time. Whoa, let's take a step back here. Everyone's head's blowing up, right? Okay. So what are you talking about as far as property? What is this quote unquote tangible value?
Everything and anything that is in your name with a social security number attached to it. So what you think you own, you do not. The state always owns it. Always. Because your name.
Say that one more time. Who owns it?
The state.
Okay.
State owns it because they own the name and the social security number. So in essence, they make it look like you think you own it, but you don't ever own it. They own it. Why? Because they've got the certificate of title.
Okay, so this is a really big thing that you kind of are dancing around right now. What are we really talking about? Are we talking about a story of people thinking that they are the masters and people thinking that they're the slaves type of dynamic?
Yeah, essentially. And it's also those thinking that they're the masters when they're actually the slaves and they don't realize it, you know. But there's a whole lot of talk about, well, if I'm not a slave here, I'm not a slave. But that's just unfortunately not the case. You are a slave if you don't know how to control that slave itself. You become the slave. However, you can control the slave.
And what do you mean by you are the slave? Like, what does that really mean?
You are the debtor. You're always the debtor, right? Because you keep claiming to be the responsible party for that entity, which is a debtor. See?
Mhm.
So even if you have $1 million bills in the bank, you're still a debtor because those dollar bills are just debt notes. They have no value. And people hearing that are probably like, what do you mean? I got $1 million. I'm, on my way to being rich. Not necessarily. Those dollars don't mean anything. Now, if you take those dollars and you buy something, a tangible asset, a real asset, gold and silver or property, now you have $1 million worth of tangible value, but you still don't have it if it's attached to that name and that social security number, because you can pay your house off, but try to stop paying property tax. You'll get foreclosed on, even if it's $100 tax on a $2 million home, they'll foreclose on it. How can they foreclose on it if it's yours? How can you pay land tax to someone if it's yours? Oh, well, if the state has to have their taxes. Well, wait a minute, but the state doesn't own the land. Allegedly, you do. That's where you have to go, oh, I am a slave. The state does own the land. I don't own the land. If I own the land, I wouldn't have to pay the state any taxes, right?
All right. So again, in a sense, we're doing really deep disclosure right now in this interview.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of cognitive dissonance, I'm sure, is flaring for a lot of people right now. Okay.
Probably.
So, yeah, most likely. Yeah. Okay.
Did for me at first.
Yeah. So I just want to take a breath. And again, for the third time, let's take a step back here and really look at the layman's terms kind of things here. Like, why should we know this information? Why is it important for us to know that in the legal system, we're technically, well, how would you describe that? What are we technically?
Well, you're actually a lot of things, and none of them are good. You're a debtor, you're a ward of the state, you're an orphan, you're a bond servant. The roles are reversed. When you think you're the debtor, the roles are reversed. You should be the creditor and the master, and the public servants, which are government, should be the bond servant. They're the ones that need to be bonded and stuff. But you can't be the master unless you reverse those roles. So what they do is they put you in the role of a debtor when you're a child until you become the age of majority, quote unquote, but you don't ever really reach the age of majority because you don't understand the roles. So you always stay a minor. Even if you're 90, you're a minor if you haven't changed the roles and reversed them back. Okay, so this is all about, flipping it around, right? So in the Bible, quote unquote, Satan is always, the reverse, right? So this is all about the reverse. Now, I don't believe in Satan or anything like that, but, but I do believe that what they're telling you in those books is how this commercial operation works. Reverse the roles. You're the debtor or you're the creditor. So you got to be the creditor, right? And the creditor is what funds everything here, everything in this country. And they had to do this because we were sold out back at the Civil War.
So are you saying that the appropriate, for lack of a better term, the appropriate roles are supposed to be that citizens, quote unquote, because I'm using these quotes because these words have a lot of meanings, okay?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So are you saying that the appropriate role is supposed to be reversed, that the citizens, if you will, are supposed to be the creditors, and the government is basically supposed to be stewards of the process? Is that what you're saying is supposed to be like that? Somewhere
Absolutely.
along the lines, the script got flipped?
Mm-hmm.
And is that why you you believe that this information is so important that more people know it?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Because you also have two different governments functioning here, and that's what people don't realize either. You've got two distinct separate governments and they will corral you and force you into one. So that way you believe that they're all one government, but they're not, and everybody knows the federal government is different than the state government, right? So you have that. But it gets deeper than that because the federal absorbed the states at some point behind closed doors while everybody was falling asleep at the wheel and not learning about how government actually functions. So now you have one totalitarian government instead of the two separate governments that you're supposed to have. So we'll break that down real quick. Okay, so the United States of America is a union of states, okay, that are each separate sovereign nations. Each state is a sovereign nation, not unlike any other country. Every state is a country. Now, in order to organize those states as a united union, they created the United States, which is its own government, which is a management company for the 50 states. Okay, that's all the United States is.
The United States, not of America, the United States. Okay.
Yes, you have to be distinct, okay? And again, I tell people all the time, the evidence of that is clear. It's in the Federal Rules of Civil Procedure, okay? And if you look that up in the United States Code, it's Title 28 USC 1746, number 1, paragraph 1, and it will clearly tell you that you can sign an oath without the United States, but under the laws of the United States of America. So how can you sign an oath without the United States, but under the laws of the United States of America if they're both one and the same? Because they're not. Okay, so that's the first thing to wrap your head around, that what you think you're living in and what government you think applies to you actually doesn't. Okay, so in order for this central management company to survive, once the bankers took it over, it had to use our credit without us knowing so it could enrich the bankers, okay? The bankers wanted to do that. They wanted to steal our good faith and credit so that they can enrich themselves, okay, which they did effectively, and made us believe that we are the debtor. But it's just a belief and it's just a role reversal. Okay, so when we reverse those roles, we become the creditor again. We have much more power. When we're the debtor, we have no rights protected by Constitution. None. When we're the creditor, we have all the rights protected by Constitution and beyond. We've got more rights than the Constitution.
Okay, hold on. Are you saying, because I can feel this right now, are you saying that I'm not protected by the United States Constitution?
Right. You are not protected as the debtor. If you're coming as the debtor, if you're coming as you, Peter Onan, the creditor, the real man, not this entity that was created at birth, yes, you're protected. But you can't, it's not enough to just go say that. You can say, oh, I'm a real man, and they'll laugh at you. Yeah, you're real, you're standing there.
And this is really what you teach, correct?
Yeah, I teach people how to back themselves up. Where are the facts that make your claim that these two entities exist? That this is, where's the facts to show that this is actually happening? And that's what I tell people, where to go and where to look and what facts they are. Because it's all written in the law books, it's all there. It's just skewed, it's just hidden in all different pieces of these codes and all, there's an estimated 8 million laws. Now, if the maxim of law, which cannot be changed, that's a historical precedent over thousands of years, it's called a maxim. If that maxim says that ignorance of the law excuses no one, how is it possible for someone to actually know 8 million laws? Because I can tell you that the lawmakers don't even know 8 million laws. So you have to use your common sense and go, well, why is that? Well, if I can't break a maxim of law, which you cannot do, it's impossible to break a maxim of law, then how am I supposed to know these 8 million laws? Well, it's all reversed. Everything has to be reversed. So they've reversed what law is, right? And they teach you that state code and statute, that's law. But that's not law, that's policy for the state employees. It doesn't apply to the quote unquote citizen, the free man. It doesn't apply to him or her. It only applies to the employee. But we're all trained to believe that it applies to me. I'm not, I live in the state, it applies to me because I'm that thing. No, it only applies to what the state owns.
All right, so you're basically saying we've all been hoodwinked.
Yeah, essentially.
Yeah.
And again, you know, there's people like you said, their heads are probably blowing up. Well, yeah, and they probably want to know, oh yeah, well, what makes you think you know that you have any proof that this is true? Well, I could play my audios for you where I go into court and literally the judge answers to me, and I'm not even there for myself. I'm there to help someone else because I don't have any court issues. I would go into court as counsel for people, and the judge would literally give his authority over to me. I even have one judge asking me to run his courtroom because I took his authority, because I am the authority, not him. I'm the authority. See? And that's the proof. The proof is in the pudding. It's not in the legal. I mean, yes, it also is in the legal text. I can show you where those facts are. But to actually put the rubber to the road, there's no one on this planet that's going to tell me that this isn't true. I've got all the evidence in the world to prove that. And they know it because they back off me, you know, every time.
All right. I love doing interviews with you because we start off on this conversation and we follow this route of the conversation, and we could go so many different directions, you know, with everything you ever say. What are they doing with these birth certificates?
Well, they're collateralizing them. They're funding the machine. They're funding the war machine. You know, they're constantly funding the war machine. They're constantly funding the destruction of Earth to meet their benefit. You know, so they're creating money out of our credit, and then they're using that money to destroy the Earth. You know, for their benefit, right? In contracts, in war contracts, you know, and many other contracts, contracts that keep us sick, you know, contracts that take all our property away, contracts that take our rights away. All this stuff is being done off of our own credit. So when you understand the roles, you begin to realize that when you go to the bank to get a loan, you credit the bank, then the bank credits you back and charges you money for it, or what they call money. So essentially, you're the creditor, not the bank. But then you wind up playing the role of who? The debtor. But you're not the debtor, you're the creditor, because the bank has to take your signature over to the treasury and get that signed off on so that they can actually get money for it. Okay, so you just gave them the credit, and that they lent it back to you, supposedly. Bank by law is not allowed to lend its own money. It can only lend depositors money, number one. Number two, the Federal Reserve said that dollar bills are not money, that dollar bills have no intrinsic value. So what are they really lending? Nothing. They're lending nothing. It's thin air. Now, all this is changing. So before we close, I want everyone to know that this is changing rapidly. And I don't support any politics because I know the game is just all BS. It's all BS. However, I also have inside people that I know that talk about what Trump is doing, and but it's not Trump. So we need to set that record straight. It has nothing to do with Trump. It is the military that has put him in there by the vote of the people, supposedly, okay, to make these changes so that we can reverse this on a much larger scale, but it takes time. So what you're seeing in the news is not what is actually happening, okay, but it takes time, and there are things being done right now that are reversing all this. I, like many other people out there who are aware of what I'm aware of, decided to take the matter into my own hands and create my own protections and take back my own value. So I wanted to say, the other thing I wanted to say before we close was, for those of you just hearing this that want to get upset that you're hoodwinked, you know, that's not the way to go either, because we were all duped. You know, there's no burning anyone at the stake, because it's not the people you see on the screen that did it. It's the people that you'll never see that did it. The people you never know their name, you'll never know their face. They're the ones that did it. That's called a coup d'etat, you know, and that's exactly what happened in 1933. We had a coup d'etat, and they took over. And they did it at the Civil War, but 70 years later, in the next bankruptcy reorganization, they further cemented it with the coup d'etat. So we can't be angry about it. We have to be smart about it. We have to watch, learn. The more we learn, the more we're going to be ready to accept these huge changes that are about to take place. It's about to shock everybody. You know, that's really the key, is understanding and accepting.
Would you say, and this is the last question that I'm going to ask you, and let's keep it short. Would you say that this topic really is the foundation to the structure that has been oppressing the world for so long?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And that's the answer to the question, is why is it so important that we know this information?
Right.
And
Now, we'll get into it deeper on other calls, but you know, the birth certificate is modeled after the baptismal certificate. Okay. So really the church, okay, it has created a lot of this. And if you read the Bible, it's a playbook for how all of this is laid out. Okay. The Bible, and that's why it was rewritten by King James, you know, the new version. Okay. Because they were laying out the process for how this is done.
the Catholic Church, correct?
Specifically, not to pinpoint anybody or lay blame, but yeah, I mean, the evidence is clear. Yes. And they actually used to sell tickets to heaven at one point. You know, the church used to sell tickets to heaven. Yeah, yeah. You had to pay them so you didn't go to hell. So they made up this thing called hell, this boogeyman. And if you didn't pay the tickets and the tithes, then you went there, right? But you could get out of jail for free as long as you did this. You know, now once they started the baptismal stuff and they put that in the Bible that you must be baptized and all of that, they did the certificates. Oh, a certificate. Now you're in the church. We gave you a baptismal certificate. You now belong to the charity of the church. So they took the government and they modeled the same thing. You get a birth certificate. You now belong to the charity of the government. All right. So the government now, because it's divvying out its charity to you, you're subservient to it. You are its slave always. You are its debtor, you know, because you registered to be that. You registered to accept that benefit called Social Security, which is nothing more than, you know, a benefit of Caesar, essentially. So they got it all figured. This is thousands of years old. This even goes back to Babylon, but we'll just keep it around Jesus's time for this sake.
Thank you.
All right. Take it 2,000 years back. That's all.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think we did a really great job at a short interview about the birth certificate. Is there any last words you want to say?
No, I think if we get into anything else, we're going to get too deep. So we'll save that for the next one.
Yeah, I agree. And if this is the first video you're watching, just know that there will be a lot more to come. So look for that. All right. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, brother. See you soon.